To the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that is committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles as introduced by Sydney Banks to people throughout the world. Today, we're so happy to have Chayelle Rose, and she is a mom of 5, and she helps with present parenting, helping parents drop resentment, connect with who they truly are. She has a great program that maybe she'll tell us a little bit about at the end. And after coaching for a couple of years, she trained with Michael Neal in 2020 with coaching mastery and received amazing supervision from Hannah Studley. So with that, Chayelle, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you, Tom, for your month-on-month dedication to 3PGC.
Yes.
Again. So my name is Chayelle Rose. You can call me Chayelle, any variation on the name. And I grew up in the UK in London, and I moved to Israel in 2010. So I've been living here for 14 years. Thankfully, I've got the 2024 at the bottom of my screen, so I can do some quick maths. I moved to Israel because I just absolutely fell in love with the culture here. And there's something about the warm Mediterranean climate and the way that people are just really embracing their emotions and embracing living life to the fullest is something really like amazing. So present parenting is the program that I'm currently doing, and so I decided to call it the topic of this evening because as funny as that might sound, until you land with a catchy name that actually makes sense and describes exactly what you're doing, you're like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And all of a sudden, one day, literally from one day to the next, it was like, well, obviously that's it. It's present parenting. Because for so many years, as I said, in 2010, I got married. And a year later, I had my first baby. And even though motherhood was something that was really an intrinsic and integral part of my belief system and something I thought was wholly good for me and for the world and for humanity at large, let's get really big on this. In reality, when you're sitting there in your little apartment, and you have, one screaming child, 2 screaming children, it just doesn't feel like that. And for a very long time, I felt like I was at war with myself, because on the one hand, there were all these goals and dreams and big aspirations I had as a mom. And I'm sure you can relate to this on whichever level or whichever struggle you would have with something that you believe in, and yet when you're actually involved with that thing, it just doesn't seem to quite match up to the glamour of the vision that you have. And so it was really difficult. It was really hard. There were so many challenges involved in getting to a place where I was actually living the life of the kind of mother I wanted to be, the kind of image I had. And it took many years of figuring out how to get rid of all that negativity that got in the way. Because for a long time, it didn't look like negativity. It looked like life. So I think also there was another challenge that, as I hinted like a couple of minutes ago, sometimes the lack of glamour in a world that really values external achievements and accomplishments and things that you could write up on a paper, it really took away from really valuing the tiny moments, right? And we're not talking about the big moments, we're talking about the tiny moments, right? The shared smiles between you and your child, the the coloring a page together. Like no one is going to sit there and applaud you for it. And yet these are the tiny moments that make up real life, right? Spilling, cleaning up spillages, doing all the tons and tons of tiny tasks that you have to do during the day. So I had this story I wanted to read to you, which I thought was very funny. It's very short. And I thought this really put everything, all my struggle into a nutshell. So, this is taken from a book called Our Bodies, Our Souls, written by somebody called Tzipora Heller. And she said, somebody I know was speaking at a university campus about the role of the traditional female role. An angry young woman interrupted his lecture. While you're here at the podium lecturing, where's your wife? In the kitchen? My wife is a professional, he answered calmly. She runs a group home for unwanted children. The woman was taken aback. Let me tell you a little bit about what she does. Her job entails, among other things, overseeing the children's motor and intellectual development, teaching them the social skills they will need to succeed later in life, helping them develop positive, healthy self-image. She accomplishes this by first creating an environment conducive to spiritual well-being and growth, and then designing an individualized approach to meet the unique needs and talents of each child in the home. If these children were left to grow up on the street, they'd have little chance of emerging as happy and productive adults. But thanks to my wife, they will hopefully succeed. By this time, the young woman's fire had cooled. Apparently, she was satisfied with this particular woman, and that she was indeed doing something valuable with her life. For a second or so, it seemed like he would just continue his talk. His basic honesty, however, got the better of him, and he said with a grin, the truth is that the 8 children in the home she runs are ours. But if she didn't want them, who would? So to me, when I read that story many years ago, it captured that struggle in a nutshell. It's the glamour versus the non-glamour. And with a simple twist of whose children they were, all of a sudden, it was something absolutely fabulous. So instead of talking more, I thought I would put the question to you, what kind of, in this kind of domain, but you can take it anywhere you like, what kind of things would you want to hear about, or what kind of struggles or questions would you have? You can unmute or put it in the chat.
Yeah, and also if you'd like to, we're a small group, but you can also raise your hand. If you go down to the reactions button, there'll be a raised hand. And yeah.
Yeah, I must say I like that story because it's so true that it's all changes by like virtue of like whose children they are, basically. At least it seems to be that way, which is very interesting if you think about it, right? Because that means that just when you do all of these things for your own children, as you say, like it's not glamorous, it's just like work that you do like day by day, day after day, and all of a sudden it changes if you were apparently doing that like for somebody else's children. So
Right.
yeah. So I just wanted to say, thank you for sharing that story. I thought it was quite interesting. And I think what I recognize as well is just, yeah, all these little tasks. Sometimes it's difficult to not see it as like chores that you just have to like go through, like, oh, let me do this and this and this and that and cleaning and then I get to the end of the day and then I can, like sit down and relax a little bit. Oftentimes I actually do manage to, or I actually am able to enjoy it and to, be present. But, if you're busy and then there's a job and everything, sometimes it's a little bit, yeah, as you say, like you can start seeing it as like a chore or something negative. Well, it doesn't have to be. So, yeah, it's all about like how you perceive it as well. And of course, like what the world thinks about it also perhaps plays a role in that. So, yeah. that's interesting to think about, I guess.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking you, what would you say is like something that would commonly come up as getting in the way of you truly appreciating your role?
So I think I'm lucky to have a brother who's got 4 kids. And he told me once, he said like, well, with the first one and the second one, I was always trying to, you know, get through all the work so I could actually do something for myself. And I just never managed to actually, you know, like do everything I had to do for the kids so I could go surfing or do something else. And he said like, once I actually let go of that whole idea, like, oh, I have to process the kids, you know, before I can do something fun. He said it completely changed like the way in which he actually saw parenting. And I think that was very good advice, because that's exactly what it is. If you constantly have this like voice, you know, like, or this little nagging voice at the back of your mind saying like, oh, you know, you actually wanted to go do something for yourself, for your job or for whatever, and now, you know, there's no time for it. I think then it becomes a very difficult thing to enjoy, you know, like everything you do on a daily basis for your children. But if you somehow can let go of that a little bit, then it changes things a lot. So
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I only have 1 kid, not 5 or 6 or 4, so it's, maybe that's a little bit of a difference.
Well, you know what? It's funny because I always feel like when people say, "Oh, you have 5 kids," I always feel like what a waste if I would only have 1 or 2. Like I've done all my mistakes already, you know. Let the other ones benefit. But you do have a point. Like there's a learning curve that comes with seeing all the mistakes that we make. And it's really helpful when we can learn through other people's mistakes as well, like you learn from your brothers. And it really is true. See, because it touches very much on self-care, because very often, and I think, you know, this is something everyone can relate to, we have this concept in the world today about self-care, and it's become such a thing that people classify it and thingify it and box it and label it, so much so. This is a true story. So many, it was about 7-8 years ago, like a while ago. And I was living in a different place, and I really had the floor where I was living was extremely old and extremely horrible. And it was really old. It was really badly done. And, you know, there were like cracks in between the tiles, and the tiles were awful and broken, and don't ask. And so for some reason, I developed this intense liking to cleaning my floor. So, you know, everything could be upside down, but the floor had to be clean, which is good, because then at least there's some semblance of something. But it was just something that became very important to me, right? So one day, a friend came around, and I said to her, do you know what? I had so many things I had to do this afternoon. I had the laundry to fold, and I had supper to cook, and I had these things to put away, and those things to, so many things. It was like, you know, and you could see I hadn't done them. Yeah, they were still out. I said, but you know what? And I used the word self-care there. Now I became allergic to the word, but I said, I'm so proud of myself. I did self-care, and I cleaned the floor because I wanted a clean floor. And she said to me, no, that's not self-care. Self-care has to be, and then she lists it, right? And I said, excuse me, I will self-care myself the way I would like to. And putting myself first and putting my needs first in this way was my form of self-care, and I'm happy. And I don't need somebody else's book to tell me how to enjoy my life. Because if somebody else's manicure is mine clean floor, that's my decision to say that. So after that conversation, I became obsessed and fascinated in a very dark way with the self-care world, because I saw suddenly people all around me chasing this thing called self-care. So people would do the obvious, like typical ones, like manicures and haircuts and massages and all nice things, right? And then they would do the more expensive stuff, like going away on these breaks and resorts and whatever. And these people were still complaining about life all the time. And it would literally come back from a 3-day break. They'd spent more than they could afford on it with their, you know, starting a family, don't have a huge budget. And they were told by society, you must do this so that you don't break. And they come back and they're still not very happy with their lives. So, and since then, the amount of people who said, well, I came back, but whatever, you know, so it gave me more and more interest in this topic. And I suddenly realized more and more that not just because my definition at that point was also very limited, cleaning my floor was my self-care. I mean, there were more things too, but it was, I would say the broader category was doing stuff for me that I want, my needs, my priorities, right? And making sure that there was some of that in the day. Now, I'm not discounting that because I feel like we all have to go through our journey of balancing priorities. And when you become a parent, you go from having only your own priorities to necessarily being engulfed by other people's priorities, and being their caretaker means you must. So it's kind of very natural for a person to swing in that direction, and then they have to kind of learn this self-care thing and swing back to find some balance. But the more I realized how out of line this was with everything I believed and everything the principles were telling me, the more I got curious to see, what is this? So yes, step one was me learning how to remember that I'm a person too, and that I can respect my own needs and respect, you know, those things that I want. But step two was really realizing, where does my happiness come from? And where, even more than that, was, where do I want my happiness to come from? Like, what makes sense in the grand scheme of things, given the fact that, like, our lives are occupied certain amount of time by work, certain amount of time housework, certain amount of time spending time with friends and family, right? Do I want to only be getting my pleasure and my enjoyment and my fulfillment from only the small pockets of time, or can I see something bigger? And once I realized that that's what kind of answer I needed to go, like that was the kind of direction I needed to look in, I got more and more curious why I wasn't enjoying the rest of the stuff. Why am I not? Why is it so hard to enjoy a supper time with 3 screaming children? But seriously, I scream too. I also have a loud voice, you know? So what's so hard about screaming? What's so difficult? So the more I challenged myself, the more I wanted to become the kind of person who is present to every moment of life, and every moment in quotes, because every moment is, who knows, but the more I want to become that kind of person who can have the potential to enjoy absolutely anything, the more my eyes opened to why I wasn't enjoying it in the first place. So number one was what I started off with, was I wasn't appreciating the absolute glamour in what I was doing. I wasn't appreciating that I am the only person who can truly love these children and can truly be their solid rock in the world. Like, that's me. There's no one more important than you to your children, whether they believe that or not. There isn't anyone more important. And the joke is, and I see this again, like with so many different people, even when there's a bad relationship, even when there's a negative relationship, the kid still wants, at the age of 50, 60, 70, they still want their parents' approval. They still hunger for it. Like it's something I've seen. It fascinates me. You can have the most angry and resentful kid, and they still want it from their parents. They still want their parent to say, I see that you are a diamond in this world. So that was one seeing for me, seeing how absolutely amazing and unique and everything my role is. And the second thing for me was to challenge myself. And this is just, I think every person can take the way that they see things and then translate it in their own direction. So by nature, I like to go against the establishment, right? So if the establishment is telling me to do self-care, I'll say no. And if the establishment is telling me, oh, life is so hard for you, I'm like, no. So I use that element of how I like to be in the world to actually say, well, who says these seemingly difficult moments must be hard? That's the way people talk. That's the way moms talk when they validate each other. And if you've had this experience, when people validate each other nowadays in the world, it's like, oh, darling, that must be so hard. And they validate themselves into a hard life. And I struggle to be normal in these kind of conversations because I'm like, well, not really. And nobody knows what to say next because we are so culturally trained to see these things as necessarily hard. So I want to open up the floor and see if anybody has anything to add to that or to question or comment. Bruce?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll need to leave in about 20 minutes. I have another commitment outside. But I think the thing that really landed in your sharing was little moments. Um, our children are watching us so intently, not only by what we're saying, but our body language and reaction time or response time better. Because it indicates how safe we are, how grounded we are. And really don't think we appreciate that those things build over time. I'm fortunate to do some work with horses at 2 ranches nearby, working with humans. And to get a connection with a horse, you have to do a series of very small things. Otherwise, you're threatening. And they sense that and they build that. And once you take a baby step, then you can take a bigger step and a bigger step. So you build rapport. And I think your title, presencing, is so important because presencing isn't necessarily the verbal message that you deliver or the skill that you demonstrate, but it's how you do it. And again, it could be in your voice inflection, your body language, your timing, and maybe just pausing before you respond, because that allows for their curiosity to surface. They are so used to other kids and people in school on devices reacting instantly. So they're taught react to life. And if you just pause, take a breath, lower your voice, and speak slowly, they're comforted. And you're modeling for them a way of relating that they usually don't get. And so you build on that trust factor with a series of little moments, as you said. I really like that. Thank you.
Thanks. That's really nice. Thank you for reminding me to pause. Curious if anyone has anything else to say or add.
Monica.
Thanks. I have a question. Do you try to show the principles to your children? And how?
So I used to listen to a lot of people who would talk about this. I remember Dickens said a few things about it, and who else? There are a few people who talked about it here and there that I picked up over the years. And it was a range. Like everybody had a different opinion, which is great, because why should there be a rule? And you know, some people were like, stay away, stay away. And I was like, okay, I'll stay away. And then somebody else gave me permission, you know, whoever it was, I don't remember. And I think it's a feeling it out kind of journey. So meaning my oldest is turning 13 very soon. So and so my older few know that they call it, there's a Hebrew word for after school extracurricular activities called a chug. So they call it, I give thought hugs, right? So they know that mommy does stuff with thoughts. They think it's quite funny. And they don't understand why it's necessary and why mummies need to learn about thoughts. They just, do you have to do your I said, well, if you want mummies to learn how to be better mummies, then yeah, they're not that fast. So so we have discussed it. We have had a couple of arguments, I would say, and that kind of teaches me to stop. Because my son, like when he's interested, he will initiate and he'll say, but how could this be thought? And I'll say, but that's just stupid. And I'll say, fine. Because it's really irrelevant. It's not something I need to convince him about. I think what's much more influential in that is two things. Number one, something I already touched on, but I want to expand on it, which is my job as a parent is to see the absolute pure goodness, right? So Michael Neal has this metaphor he uses, which I absolutely love. And I made it as a visual, which we were going to share, but it's disabled. So I'll just describe it for you. And he says, the principles in action are, and in terms of who we are, right, is if you imagine at core a pure diamond, like a real pure diamond, right? I don't know if you've ever seen in real life somebody who's really loaded with diamonds, but real blinging diamonds. Your eye just goes to them. Okay, maybe because we know how expensive they are, but there's something so attractive about a diamond. There's something whole and pure and solid and unscratchable about it, right? So at core, we're a diamond. And then we cover that over with a layer of mud. And that's our story. Everything about our story, our personality and our likes and dislikes, you know, my clean floors is in that layer. And everything about the way we look, the way we think about our parents, the way we think about our children, everything we think into being is in that layer. And I've changed this metaphor slightly, that I call that layer mud, because mud is something from which grows good stuff, right? But mud is also something that is dirty, like it can obscure things, it covers things over. So it has that dual function of, we need it to be human, we need a story, but we need to see that it's a story so that we can change when we need to change. And we never want to get stuck in a story. A story needs to serve us. And then his final layer over that layer of mud is a layer of nail polish. So that's the vision we present to the world. The my blurred screen isn't showing you what's really behind me, right? So it's actually tiny back there this time. So it's the stuff that we're willing to share with other people, but not the stuff that we aren't, right? And he's just describing it as that's kind of who we are. Like that's how we come across in the world. That's the different things, different ways that we interact with this world. But what we as parents want to do is we really want to access that diamond within our children. Like we want to see them as amazing beings, amazing, right? Like the quintessential mother hen that you read about in these old-fashioned stories that like the child can do no wrong. No, they can do wrong. But also at the same time, I just want to just not be distracted by their nail varnish, not be distracted by their story and by the 10 times that they brought a note home from school saying the next time he's out, right? I don't want to be distracted by that when I'm relating to him as an individual. I want to see the diamond. So that like when a child has a parent who relates to him like that, he is going to believe in himself. Now, we can't guarantee that because we are but a mere catalyst, really and truly. But if we want to do our best, that's what we're aiming for. That's what we can give our child, to actually see, wholly and fully see their goodness, right? So that's part number one. I don't need to tell him the principles for me to see I need to see that in him. I need to relate to him like that. I need to tell them truly how I feel about them multiple times a day, as well as all the scolding and why didn't you do your homework and where are your shoes and why do you never ever put your shoes where they need to go, right? So a really funny story. My 5-year-old had a t-shirt the other day and she said to me, what does it say at the bottom? So I said, it says, "You are my favorite." And it's actually a hand-me-down from my 11-year-old. So I forgot about that. And she was like, we'd just taken it out, whatever. And she put it on. She's like, "You are my favorite." So she's now my favorite. So she said, "Am I your favorite?" I said, "Well, every time you wear that t-shirt, you're my favorite." And so she said, "Oh, and when I eat chicken." Apparently, I had told her she could be my favorite when we eat chicken. But it's that kind of language that I'm talking about, like where very often our cultural backgrounds hold us back from expressing it in words, right? And we have to train ourselves to use the words, not just to feel the feelings. Like it's so important that we convey the message. We have to feel the message, but we also have to convey the message. So that's part number one. And part number two is I think it's exactly like Bruce said. It's the way you're being in the world will naturally rub off onto your children. So, a few examples. If things don't get to you so quickly, if you learn how to, if you see these things that get to you over and over again, you notice. I'll give you like again some examples. So common things that people complain about is I can't give them hot chocolate. They just spill all the time. Yes, there is a rule. You give a kid a hot chocolate, they will spill it. There is a rule. So that's true. But we also have towels in the cupboard. So when you train yourself, and it's a silly example, but you can take this example, times it by 10 and multiply it by 1,000 after that. There are these things that go on again and again and again in our house, and we have the same reactions again and again. So we wise onto that and we say, hang on, I want to become more tolerant about these things. And then we look to the principles and we look to what's holding me back. Like, why am I completely blinded when this thing happens? And we explore that and we get curious and we become people who just are more easygoing and who are trustworthy and who don't lose it when certain things happen. The kids pick that up, and the kids, and I've seen it with all my children, even the ones, because they all have their own personalities, they all have their own stories, they all have their own difficulties, but each one will pick up these different aspects and these different elements rather than the flip side, which is so easy to see as well. When the mom finds life very, very hard, she may be unwittingly passing that on to her children, like not giving them those natural ability to have the eyes to see that life is only hard, when I forget that it isn't. So sorry if that was a very long answer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I just thought something to add to it. Yeah, which I think is a big one in parenting of at any stage, which is when you need something from your child, like you need them to understand the principles, or you need them to be the type of person that anything, right? Then you've gone away from the principles. So it's actually going back to seeing that wherever they are is perfection right now. And wherever you are as a parent is perfection right now. That's where we need to be at our stage of the journey.
And this is so different to what we are used to, because we are used to think that we have to teach them, to show that we are the people who know, and they are complete, they are perfect, as you said.
Yeah. Do you also get it that this feeling sometimes that's so pervasive nowadays, that parents are so fearful of messing up their children? Do you see it? Like, I even see it in people's language. Like, they'll say things and it's become a cool thing to say. Oh, I've told them I'll pay for their therapy, you know, after I've messed them up. And it's like, no, go to therapy yourself, you know? No, I'm joking. But it's I wrote this ebook actually. I wrote an ebook called You Don't Need Fixing. And as I was writing it out, it's a short little book, it's 38 pages. And as I was writing this out, it dawned on me like clearer and clearer and clearer how much more we need to believe. It might sound really like airy-fairy, but we need to believe in ourselves. Our kids need us to believe in ourselves if they need anything. They need us to see that same diamond that we want to see in them. We need to see it in ourselves. Like, we have to. We are almost obligated. You become a parent, now go find your diamond, right? Because, which to me is the most fantastic thing ever. Like, how fantastic to be forced to become a better human being. So, I mean, I wouldn't do it otherwise. Like, too much effort, but too late. You have to do it for these people. And then you realize in retrospect, I had to do it for myself all along. That's what I was here to do, to discover this. So I have this phenomena that happens very often when so I have 5 kids, so I've had 5 babies. And I have this phenomena very often when you're holding a newborn or a very small baby. I feel so deeply like the absolute like wonder of humanity and the absolute purity and idyllic, blissful everything that is in this child. And I've had this so many times where I'll feel that about this child, and then my principal's head will go, it's not him, it's you and him. Like, what's the difference? Just age and thinking and a pair of glasses. That's it. So having kids and having a family and having the challenges that come with a family, to me, is just God's boot camp into finding that way to goodness and finding that way, ironically so, of saying the world, the weight of the world is not on my shoulders, because experiencing the weight of the world on your shoulders gets so heavy that you have no choice at that point to say, well, it can't be, there's got to be another way. Actually, there's a great story, and like, feel free to, you know, put your hand up or interrupt me at any point. I'll just ramble. Otherwise, there's this really great story that I read many years ago. There's a psychiatrist called Dr. Tversky, and he was a young resident. He's no longer alive. He was a young resident in a psychiatric hospital in America, and there's this patient there who all day he's got his hands up here, and so when they were telling him about everybody on the ward, they said, look, you know, we don't know what's up with him, but he's got his hands up there, and it's a problem because it stops him from actually doing the things he needs to do. Like, he can't take showers. It stops him from, you know, taking care of himself. And we don't know why he does it. It's a big mystery, and we don't know what to do. We've tried this and we tried that and we tried the other. So day after day, Dr. Tversky, you know, examines him, talks to him, and he can't work it out. And then one day he goes over to him and he says, look, give it to me. I'll take care of it for you. So the man has his hands up here, and he looks like he's actually physically giving something to Dr. Tversky, right? And finally, he's able to put his hands down. And the doctor says, now, you go take care of yourself, and I'll look after the world for you. If it wasn't a true story, it would be the most amazing metaphor in the world. But it's such a true feeling that we all have when it comes to kids sometimes. It comes to anything, but when it comes to kids, oh, we have one more layer of complication that really fools us. They're our responsibility. Bye, Bruce, thanks. Like, they're our responsibility. So surely we must take care of them. And yeah, we must take care of them. We got to feed them, and we got to make sure that they're somewhat clean. But besides for that, they are so fantastic, amazing human beings that on any given day, you don't know what your role is, and it's a constantly evolving role. And so all the lists that we have that we didn't do or we should do or whatever it is, who knows? When we go with the flow, the things that need to happen, and the things that don't happen. Guess what? Many things don't happen in a household. So it was very interesting, because I'll stop for a second because I want to check if anybody wants to chime in. So I was actually talking with I have a few groups going on at the moment with my present parenting program, and we were talking about you know, the more difficult situations. So somebody said, you know, there's certain situations you just can't be present. You just can't be in that space of love, and you just can't. And I challenged her. And I said, why not? So she said, because of this and because of that, and because of this and because of that. And she gave me lists and lists of reasons why, a whole story about, you know, her daughter who needed to, she wanted to buy ice cream, and there's no space in the freezer. And if she buys ice cream, then the rest of the kids are not going to eat. And then if she buys ice cream, then this is going to happen. And how can I enjoy my decision of whether to say yes or no. And I told her my counter argument. I told her a story that happened to us just now. You know, one of the kids came home from school with the aforementioned naughty note, and the kid refused to apologize, and the kid did not want to get the punishment from the teacher that was being suggested. And I suggested, well, apologize. Go to school tomorrow. I'll write a note with you right now. If you don't want to say it, let's write it together. And the kid refused. And then the kid refused to go to bed. Now, I wanted to read a book with one of the older kids. So past a certain point, I said, okay, don't go to bed. He was in his room and he wasn't going to bed. I'm downstairs. I'm enjoying myself. I'm not worrying about him. And believe me, I've had practice to get to this point, but plenty of naughty notes. So, but it was so amazing because I truly experienced what it was to have a situation that isn't pleasant, that isn't resolved yet. We don't know what's going to happen. And yet, not my problem right now. He's a human, a little one, but he's still capable of seeing, here's option 1, here's option 2. I need to see what's worth it in my mind. He actually probably needed that space to not go to sleep, to mull it over in his head. Now, he's this really wonderfully stubborn child. So at around 9:45, I see him like this, sleeping. So I lay him down, and thankfully he stayed sleeping. He woke up in the morning, and my husband said to me, you know, what are we going to do? And I said, we'll see in the morning. Like, he knows the 2 options. We cannot run his life for him. So, and when you're not in the story, you forget this tension, this little tension in your heart of like, oh my goodness, what's he going to do? Because you don't want your child to suffer, and you don't want your child to make bad choices or what you think is a bad choice. But actually, you don't know. Maybe sometimes they have to make choices that then teaches them something else. You have to be able to let them live that journey. He woke up in the morning. We had 2 or 3 refusals to get out of bed, but on try number 4, it worked. Not sure why. And he got out of bed. God gifted him with a good mood, and he said, I'm going to apologize. I was not expecting that. I really wasn't expecting that, and it doesn't matter. What was interesting about the whole story was when you let someone be, then you're able to be their parent. You're able to be that rock of support. And sometimes that rock of support is the loving presence. And sometimes that rock of support is the loving presence that comes with a boundary that says, choice number 1, choice number 2, ain't no more choices. But you can't do that when you feel like you need to save your child from disappointment, or you need to save your child from a choice that you wouldn't make. Monica, you had something to say?
That's a beautiful story. Thank you.
It didn't feel so beautiful at the time, I'll tell you that. It's always nicer in retrospect. Yeah.
Well, Chayelle, we just have a few minutes left, but I just wanted to chime in a little bit in, talking about being present. It is, to me, literally the one thing that's always available, always, undeniably present. Whether it feels loving or not might seem like another issue, but just plain, simple, ordinary, being present is always available. You can't deny it because you have to be present to deny it. And in the context of the principles, Sid once said, and present is conscious, which is, again, as long as you're awake, you're always conscious. Or you have that available. And Sid once said, if you know one principle, you know them all. So you're good to go. So I love that you're talking about being present and how available that is, and how that just, you know, is always there.
Yeah, it really is. It's really there. Even in the middle of the night, even when there's too many people screaming to even count them, you know, it's always, 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 always there. Always. And it's such a fun, exciting journey when you discover yet again, this isn't a problem. It really is. I'd love to end off with just one short, very short story. It's a little bit of a negative story, but I hope to accomplish something by it. And this was a story that was told to me by my friend, a good friend of mine, and she grew up with a mother who was very caught up with a whole in I'm very bad at, like, was it the 60s or the 70s or the somethings, a massive wave of feminism. And her mum trained as a lawyer, had an amazing corporate job, and then she had kids. And she had so much thinking about being a mother, and she was so distant from the awesomeness of cooking a kid a meal that my friend once told me that, you know, we were talking like mums do. Oh, what do you do when your kids leave food on the plate? Do you do this? Do you do that? You know, what's acceptable nowadays? You know, how did our mothers raise us? Whatever. We had that conversation, and she said, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but when I was growing up, there would never have been a time where I wouldn't have finished the food on my plate, because if my mother cooked me a meal, I was so grateful that there was food. Like, I wouldn't have even considered leaving any of it. It wouldn't have come in. And oh, it hit me when she said that. I felt so sad for that little child who had to appreciate a plate of food. And in that moment, it changed something for me, because we genuinely do so many things for our children, again, at any age. And sometimes there's that twinge of, do they even appreciate this? And the answer is no, they don't. And they will not. And maybe in 30 years, when they have to do it themselves, they'll call you up on the phone and they'll say, did you do this for me? But this story taught me, wow, I don't want them to appreciate me. I need to be the one who appreciates me, and that's it. Like, I saw the ill health in appreciation, and it completely switched everything, you know, from that day on. So, slightly negative story, but hopefully has some positive connotations for our lives.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, I did see that Becky had her hand up a few minutes ago, but put it down. Do you want to still ask a question, Becky? Do you have time, Chayelle?
Sure.
Becky, do you still want to say something?
Yeah, if there's time. I put it down because I realized we're running a bit short on time. Yeah, it ties in with what you were just saying, really. That thing about appreciation is something that really made me think. So I have two little girls who are lovely, amazing. And my oldest one is a little bit nervous, kind of nail biter, bit of a stammer, a bit nervy. And she is lovely, and she constantly she's wonderful. Like, she constantly tells me how much she loves me, and basically gives me loads and loads of appreciation. And I always kind of slightly wonder, like, basically kind of going back to what you're saying, people being afraid they've messed their kids up, but I always slightly wonder, oh, why does she think she needs to do this so much? She's 3 and she doesn't want to go to nursery. She just wants to be at home with me all the time. And it's lovely, but I slightly wonder, like, oh, why does she feel she has to hold on so hard?
Do you think it might just be her age?
I don't know. I mean, she's been like it since she was born, really. And all her other friends, I mean, she's just coming up to be 4. All her other friends seem to sort of whiz into nursery and, on the whole, be fine. And she's kind of been, I don't put her in a lot because she makes it clear she doesn't want to go. So I just kind of put her in a couple of mornings, a full day in the morning. Yeah, and she, quite often she's like crying and really doesn't want to go. And she kind of says, "Oh, I have fun when I'm there, but I just want to be with you, Mummy. I don't want to be anywhere else." And I kind of think that's lovely, but I wouldn't like, oh, oh, that's lovely, but
I think you should. I think you need to write this down, and then when she's a teenager, remind yourself that she was once like that.
yeah,
But there is
that's
this recording, so there's hope. We can show it to her.
yeah, I hear you.
I'm not minimizing. I'm just seeing that when there's any kind of concern like that, like what you're describing is not really a handicap. It's not something that is affecting the way her ability to do things, right? Her ability to socialize or her ability to, get practical things. It's not a handicap. I think that's the only thing we have to watch out for is when our lack of belief can cause a handicap. Meaning, and I'm trying not to get outside and about this. So again, I really am using the catalyst language because we can do our best or we can do our worst and who knows what's going to happen. And I really, truly believe that. But when we are trying to do our best, let's say, and I'll use your specific example, there'll be a point where she does have to go out more.
Yeah.
And you will have to focus on your belief that she can and that she can do this and that it's age appropriate.
Yeah. Well, it's coming. She starts school full time in September.
Yeah.
So
you're going to hover outside.
That's a really good point. Like, just believe that she can do it. Thank you.
Because your heartstrings, it pulls at your heartstrings.
Yeah. Oh, it's heartbreaking. I mean, to say goodbye to her when she's in tears and sort of what it, heartbreaking.
Mm. And it's the craziest thing because I had this this year with my 2-year-old. I sent her out just in the mornings, and it's interesting. She comes from the opposite angle. It's not her clinginess, although it is also clinginess because 2-year-olds are just intrinsically clingy. But it was her fierce kind of passion that she screamed for a few weeks until she settled down. Like, she refused to eat even, in the morning when she was awake. And I was sitting there in nervous wreck. I really was. And we have to give ourselves grace when we need to be nervous wrecks. We just have to. And we have to be honest about it and get the support we need. And I talked to her teacher, and her teacher would reassure me and tell me, this is fine. This is great. This is age appropriate. She's fine. She's very, very strong. And very often actually recently I had another issue and I went back to her teacher at home and her teacher reminded me of who she was, because sometimes as moms we get blinded by what is it. So actually these people who love our children also, like, they remind us, oh, they're just really strong characters, oh, she's just very loving. And then we get to see it as, all right, I can relax, this is okay. Like, we live in a world with other people, and yes, we have our own wisdom and we have to trust our own wisdom, but sometimes we're so pulled by these small little packages. We need somebody else to remind us sometimes, no, they're big packages, they're big, big packages, and they're doing great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Go for it. You seem like you're doing an amazing job.
Well, Chayelle, this has been so beautiful, and to use your diamond metaphor, it's just been a sparkling gem from start to finish. So thank you so much. for this, and there will be a recording. And anything else you want to say in closing?
No, I think I've talked enough all night.
Okay.
But
Okay.
thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And before we close, I just want to remind people there will be another webinar next week, March 5th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and it will be Laurie Karpanis, and she's always fun and engaging to listen to. So if you're free then, want to join us, please do. And feel free now to unmute yourself and say goodbye to Chayelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
nice to meet you, everyone.
you.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you, Haya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.